Ah, the arcade. A place where parents drop their kids off so they can have a peaceful day doing whatever they need to do without having to hear, "I'm bored, I'm hungry, I need my insulin." This is where you went when you wanted to play multiplayer games with people you've never met. Sadly, the arcade is dying off in the United States, being replaced by online multiplayer console games and kids who trash talk because they hear it from other players. If a kid was doing that at the arcade, at least you'd give him a good backhand across the face. Of course, in the early 90s, you could do that without getting arrested. At the arcade, you had fighting, shooter, action, puzzle, racing, sports games, and even pinball machines. And most of the games were 25 to 50 cents a game, or credits as they were called. Now it's about $1 for one credit. And all arcades have at least one game that didn't get much play, and that game was usually called a quarter sucker. What's a quarter sucker? Well, to put it simply, it's an arcade game that's very difficult, either giving you 1 to 3 lives per quarter, but one hit always kills you, in addition to the insane amount of enemies and bullets on the screen, often referred to as bullet hell. But I'll get into that more in just a second. In fact, the whole concept of the video game console was to have an arcade in your home. Essentially, every game pre-1983 was a clone of an arcade game, and it wasn't until the release of the NES in 1983 where genre-defining games took off like Super Mario Bros., Zelda, and Metroid. Now I know what you're thinking. Get to the review already, asshole. Well, fuck you. This history lesson is relevant to today's review. That, and it's keeping it from only being 2 minutes long. But that didn't stop the porting of the arcade games to the home console. Arcade games like Time Crisis 4 and Street Fighter 4 are on the current generation of consoles. But back in the 16-bit days, they ported a lot more arcade titles to the Genesis and SNES, even the dreaded quarter suckers. While at the arcade, you'll spend maybe $2 at most on a quarter sucker before saying screw it and never touching it again. If you bought the home version, you just gave the makers of the game $50. So that's $48 you just wasted. So that quarter sucker just became a wallet sucker. So get yourself a fistful of dollars and maybe a few dollars more, for this game is good, bad, and ugly. This is Sunset Riders for the Super Nintendo. Developed by Konami in 1991 for the arcade and ported to the Genesis in March of 1994 and the SNES in August of 1994, Sunset Riders is an Old West-styled run-and-gun, although run isn't the best word to use, as all the characters do is walk. I wish I could have played the arcade version first, so that way I would have at least the original to compare it to. The Genesis version is missing 4 bosses and 2 of the playable characters. Remember, when this game came to the console, it was $50, so if you bought the Genesis version, you got ripped off, because you only got half the game. The SNES is essentially the same game as the arcade, but it makes the game more politically correct and removes anything that could be considered offensive. I was told that this game is like Gunstar Heroes, only with a Western-style theme, but that was a lie. A horrible, horrible, horrible lie. While the arcade had up to 4 players, the console has only 2, but you can select any of the 4 characters. Steve and Billy use pistols, while Bob and Cornholio use shotguns. The pistols shoot straight and fast, and gaining a second pistol gives you 2 shots, one straight and the other at a 45-degree angle. The shotgun bullets move slower, but they spread, and gaining a second one just increases the spread. There's also a rapid-fire pickup as well, so you don't have to keep pressing the fire button. This game is absolutely frustrating. The controls are so stiff, and the characters move at a snail's pace, and you can only slide when you're moving. Aiming diagonally is almost impossible, and it feels like you're limited to only aiming in 4 directions instead of 8. What really gets me is that your bullets go in a straight line. The enemy bullets don't. They home in on you. And when there's bullets firing on the screen, the combination of your slow-moving character and stiff controls ensures that you'll die. I did play it on normal for a while, but for the purposes of this review, I set it on easy and increased the number of lives and continues just so I could get more game footage. Otherwise, all you'd see was the first level and the first 5 seconds of the second level. If you bought this game back then, you essentially got ripped off. Not just because of its absurd difficulty, but because there's only 8 bosses, meaning there's 8 levels and they're relatively short levels too, so you can beat the game in under 20 minutes depending on how good your bullet dodging skills are. This is not a 1-player game, nor is it a 2-player game, so you'll need all 4 people just to make headway with this game, and sadly the console version only allows 2 people, whereas the arcade allows up to 4 people to play at once. This is not a good console game. It's a good arcade game as it gobbles up quarters like a fat kid with cupcakes. And another thing, when you run out of lives, and when you go to use one of your continues, you don't leave off where you died. No, you go back to the beginning of the level. So if you were on the boss, well, guess what you gotta do? You gotta go through the entire level again. So more than likely, you'll get to the boss and die after spending all of your lives and have to repeat the process again and again. And unfortunately, again. So are you having fun yet? 'Cause I know I sure am. Screw it. This game can go fuck. That's it. I'm done. I played the Sega Genesis version of Sunset Riders for a little bit just so I could get some kind of comparison. And the Sega Genesis version is a lot more forgiving compared to the Super Nintendo. At least with the Sega Genesis, when you use one of your continues, you pick up right where you left off. You don't go back to the beginning of the stage. But whatever. Thank God this game didn't have a sequel, and that it just rode off into the sunset.